Hey there viewers, and welcome back to the South Main Auto channel. If you're new here, welcome to our channel. Got this 2003 Chevy S-10 here, and it has a complaint of no four-wheel drive or intermittent four-wheel drive or something of that nature. Guy just wants me to have a look at it and see if we can fix it for him. So first thing first, we'll see if we can hear the transfer. This has an electric transfer case shift motor, so it's push button. So we'll just see if we can hear that. And I hope you can in the video, but we can hear it here. We see the two-wheel drive lights up. The four-wheel drive light lights up, so that indicates to me that the transfer case is shifting. So it's probably not the transfer case shift motor, but we'll take it for a drive and see what we can figure out here. So what we can do now, we got it outside, I've got it neutral, we can just kind of verify that our 4 low works. It feels like it does. Yeah, that's definitely low range. Definitely hear the transfer case shifting. That's too high. So it appears that the transfer case is definitely shifting. What we'll do, probably the easiest way to figure this out without, trying to spin the tires is typically when a vehicle's in four-wheel drive and you turn the wheel tight, they'll crow hop, what we call crow hopping, especially on these the style front end. If it indeed locks into four-wheel drive, when you turn tight, it'll bind up. Right now we're in two-wheel drive and you can see it turns very easily. So back up here, and then if that works, then we'll go find some gravel and put it a little bit under a load. So now we're neutral. We'll put it in four-wheel drive. This is 4 high. Pull ahead. We'll try to turn tight. Well, there's a problem. Oh yeah, we're getting some serious noise here. We better stop that. Well, so must be that's what he's talking about. Well, it definitely sounds like we heard the problem or the complaint. He didn't really say much about it, making noise. In fact, it didn't work, but binding them up on a hard surface is pretty good way to find a weak link in a four-wheel drive system. And obviously this one appears to work in a straight line. Just that little bit we went, you can kind of feel it bind a little, but boy, when we turn the wheel to the right there, it definitely snapping and popping. Sounds to me like it's coming from the front axle area. We could see that the drive shaft appeared to stay rotating. Didn't look like it was skipping or stopping there, and to me, I know it's hard to tell in the video, but the noise definitely sounded like the front end. It didn't sound like it was coming underneath my seat like in the transfer case area, but sometimes that's hard to tell the way it can resonate through a drive shaft. So what I want to look at first, being that it appears the transfer case works, in and out of high and low, and it seems to work pretty quickly. I'm not really going to focus any efforts there. The front end on these is pretty failure prone, particularly the vacuum actuators that GM uses on these. They stick them underneath the battery, and I've seen a lot of corroded and messed up, four-wheel drive vacuum actuators underneath the battery tray, simply because it's underneath the battery tray. And I don't know if on the battery sulfates or the hydrogen gas from it or what it is, but they really seem to corrode a lot. So I say we just take a minute, look there, see what that looks like, make sure that's engaging all the way, pulling the front end in all the way. If it is, then we're gonna have to go to the front axle and kind of see what's happening there in that right side axle shaft, axle housing. I think we did a video like this on a Dodge half ton, but that was, I think it was an electric actuator on that, if I remember right. I'll put a link there, and I kind of show how that front axle works with the split axle and a little coupler that slides them together. So this works very much in the same manner, just with a vacuum actuator and a pull cable. So let's have a look. So like I say, the actuator is underneath the battery, and they're kind of difficult to see. Just trying to look under there with a mirror or anything like that. So for what little effort it takes to yank the battery out, we'll pull this battery out and pop the battery tray out there. It's looking kind of crusty. Hopefully that goes well. Just kind of get a visual inspection, see what we're dealing with here. I think she's seen better days. I don't know. Probably don't even really have to take the bolts out of this thing. Oh boy. Can get her just to survive the ride here. Yummy. And there we have it. It's our battery tray. What's left of it. And there's our four-wheel drive actuator. So when we engage our four-wheel drive, this pulls, locking in our front axle, and this is what we kind of wanted to have a look at, see what it looked like. Appears that the bracket and everything is still intact. I'm gonna go get a jumper pack here, hook it to our battery cable, and fire this up and make sure our actuator is actuating and coming in and out like it's like it should. Like I say, a lot of times you'll see on these, I don't know if this light's too bright, but these brackets, I've seen these brackets right off of the inner fender rod out, where this just isn't working good, and the bracket started to kind of fold up on us. This one appears to still be intact. I don't see any real looseness on it, so I grabbed our jumper pack. I got that hooked up. I threw rolled the vehicle ahead and put it up on a lift here a little bit so we can have it neutral, so we can get the front axle lined up. So hopefully we can see this engaged. So I'm going to go ahead and start it. Right now it's in a two-wheel drive position, so it's released. When we put it in four-wheel drive, I expect to see this actuator pull in all the way, so keep an eye on that. I can't pull it manually by hand. Got it neutral. I would think that I could. Go ahead and put it in four-wheel drive here. I tell you what, before I do that, let me spin this front wheel a little bit. I got up in the air. I'm spinning the front wheel right now. Still can't actuate that. Let me go pop it in four-wheel drive. it looked like it, I didn't see it go in, but let's see, it did. So that pulled right in. Okay, I'm gonna put it back in two-wheel drive. Gosh, I would have thought I could have pulled that. Back in four-wheel drive, okay. I'm turning the front wheel, and it is engaged. I'm not sure why I can't pull it by hand. Two-wheel drive there. So it came right back out. Boy, I don't know why I can't move that by hand. That's kind of bizarre. Just shut it off. Unhook my jumper pack here. We don't light things up. Get that out of the way. So what's weird is I thought I could engage this manually without any issues. I got the front end up in the air, I'm spinning the right front wheel. I would have thought that would have been able to engage. The right side is the disconnect axle, but let's go underneath and have a look, see if we can figure out what's going on with this thing. So I thought before we got all full gorilla on this thing, I'd kind of show you what we're looking at or looking for. I wish I had another one of these here. I'm near certain we should be able to pull that vacuum actuator by hand. I did look back through the footage because I can't see the actuator actuating while I engage and disengage it. It doesn't appear to me that it's pulling all the way. I see it deflates the diaphragm, but it doesn't really pull a lot. I guess it's kind of hard to explain, but that diaphragm actually hooks to the end of this cable here. So this is the cable. This runs down to the front axle actuator. We'll see this down the axle. So this is the passenger side axle tube right here. So it's the longer axle tube. Cable comes in. Looks like there's a seal there. There's a big spring. Here's our shift fork. Okay. Now that shift fork goes around, I guess what would be considered a clutch gear. And what that does is that couples this stub axle over here. There's this little stub axle here that goes into the differential, and then there's the clutch gear, then there's the other half of this gear, and then the actual passenger side axle shaft that goes into this tube. It kind of all fits together here, you can see. So when we engage the four-wheel drive, this little cable gets pulled. It moves this shift fork, which takes this clutch gear, which is around this stub shaft, and it puts half of it, leaves half of it on this stub shaft and puts half of it on this other gear surface, which turns the front axle, which engages and disengages the right side axle shaft. Like I say, I show that in that, well, I might show it in this video, but Dodge video that I did, very, very similar. This is a very common front end disconnect that GM uses, Dodge uses, Ford uses. They all use a very similar design. So but being that I can't pull this cable by hand, I'm going to kind of focus right on this actuator here first and foremost, I guess. But kind of want to give you guys an idea. It's kind of what we're looking at, a little bit how it works. I know I'm not real good sometimes at explaining the systems before I go in and attack them, but that's kind of what we're doing. So there it is. There's our cable that runs from up top. This is our four-wheel drive switch here. It's our axle actuator, the axle tube, front differential, kind of give you an idea where we're at. So we're going to take unplug it here. I don't know if that little wire is going to come out. Get these 3 bolts off, slide this out. There's like a spring clip that holds this all together in here. We're going to have to reach in there with a screwdriver or something, see if we can't disconnect it. Pull this out and see, if this cable is able to move by hand. Maybe the cable is just binding up, I don't know. a bucket ready for this job. Be careful that one don't come out and hit the switch. My fingers to work here. Just didn't want that bolt to back out with my socket and bust that switch off. Alright, let's see what we got. So what needs to be done is I need to pull this back, and inside here there's going to be like a little spring wire clip. I probably won't be able to show it on camera, but I've got to reach in there and kind of flick up on it to disengage it, but I think I see our problem already. I think we got a lot of rust buildup. Okay, I think I see it. There it goes. There. This actuator out of our way, show you what we got. So this here's the front axle where this went on. See, we've got a lot of rust buildup here, really pushing out on our actuator. So we can see that. I don't know if it's hurting us or not. It definitely doesn't help. So this is the shift fork here, this metal piece here. So when our actuator up there engages and the diaphragm pulls in, turn the front drive shaft here, this would pull out like that and engage our front axle, which it does. You can see kind of in the corner of the screen here the wheel turn as I turn the front drive shaft. So then when it goes back into two-wheel drive, this goes back in, and there you are. You know, the front drive shaft still spins. You know, it doesn't really, but if your front drive shaft spins, you can see the wheel's just freewheel. So when we go into four-wheel drive again, you know, front drive shaft spinning, this gets pulled out, that gets locked in, and it couples that clutch gear inside there, and then it has a spring on it, so it always wants to return to the two-wheel drive position on its own. So I'll hold some tension on it, and then when the tension's gone, you can see it pops right in. This feels and appears to work okay, despite the large amounts of rust that are building up there. So I say we focus our efforts on the cable there and see what that feels like now that it's not hooked to anything. Let's stuff this up out of our way, but here's our actuator, and I don't know if you can see it or not, but the little cable is down inside there. That's what gets pulled back and forth. So this is nothing more than a cable and our switch, which the switch has nothing to do with the cable. The switch is just a ball type push cable, and when that solid portion of the actuator or solid portion of that clutch fork comes out, it actually pushes that ball in and tells us whether or not we are in four-wheel drive. So I say we go up and move, you know, squeeze that diaphragm now that we've got all the mechanical portion out of the equation, and see how that moves. Because if that's, you know, not pulling all the way, it certainly could cause this clutch gear just to be skipping in this front axle, which, as easy as this moves, I suspect that's what we are going to find. However, if this moves easy and we know it's pulling at full stroke, then we're going to have to dig a little deeper in this front axle to see if you know, that clutch gear's, you know, the edges of it are gone, or something's causing that thing to kick out. Back up top. Well, appears to pull quite easily. Well, that's interesting. Well, there's kind of interesting. I really suspected this cable to be pretty seized up there, or something thereabouts, or binding. But obviously it's not. You know, the diaphragm appears to, work. The cable appears to move. The front axle appears to engage. I still should have been able to pull that in by hand, and that's what I don't understand. Unless I couldn't overcome the detent on the switch, but I certainly would have thought that I could have. So I think what I'm going to do now, because I don't see an obvious problem, we're going to get all that rust off there. We're going to put this back together. I'm going to re-engage that cable. Let's see if I can pull it by hand. Maybe it's binding up because of the rust, I don't know. But I think before we pull the right side axle shaft out and that axle housing, I think it's going to, be more beneficial to 100% verify that, we're having a problem in the front end or the transfer case. Like I say, with that snapping sound, it really sounded to me like the front axle. Knowing the history on these S10s with the problems with these actuators and stuff, I wasn't surprised. That's kind of why I went there first. But I think what we'll do is I'll put it back together. We don't have much time into it now, and see if we can pull that by hand. Still kind of a little perplexed with that. Once we get that done, I'll probably take and throw the chassis ear on it and see, is this noise transfer case or is it front axle? Because what if we have a chain slipping in the transfer case, binding up and then popping over and sending that noise right down the drive shaft, making it sound like the front end. I don't know, but I think that's probably the next logical step before we just go tearing into stuff, I think. This stuff is on there super thick. Let me go get the judge. This here, this is the judge. She's used to determine the condition of your subframe here in New York. We go underneath your car and do the hokey pokey. See if we can find a hole. Quite often we do, so that's why I call it the judge. This is the pass or fail tool. There, that's quite a bit of corrosion on there. Quite a bit of scaly buildup. Of course, the seal doesn't look the best, but we're still trying to figure out the problem right now, so kind of leave things alone. Get this actuator hooked back up. So basically we're just going to stick this on just like we took it off. What we'll need to do is put it in four-wheel drive. So to test this theory, I guess, that should I have been able to pull the cable, obviously we know the cable pulls easily, by itself, but I should be able to pull this out. Now, right now everything's lined up. Let me unalign it. Okay, so right now it's unaligned. So if I pull tension on this and turn just the passenger front wheel, it easily engages. So we should be able to do that with the diaphragm, which I was trying earlier. And this wasn't working, so I'm going to leave this out in the four-wheel drive. We got it kind of bound up a little bit. We need to stick this back on and engage our cable. You'll hear the cable click right in, just like it did. So our cable is clicked in now. We're back in two-wheel drive. We'll stick our bolts back in it, snug this thing up, and do some testing here. That metal bracket was looking pretty shoddy, so I think we're just going to use a zip tie on this for right now. That should work just fine. That won't rust. We're back under here again. For the life of me, I cannot move this thing. Even spinning this right front wheel. Boy, I still think this is where our problem is. So I tell you what, I think if I remember when we're gonna fire it up again, put it in four-wheel drive. What we're gonna do is we're gonna take a measurement to make sure this thing's engaging all the way. We might have to tear the front end back apart, which is no big deal, it's just 3 bolts. But why don't we measure the distance here from the face of this diaphragm, or from, the kind of the chrome portion here to the edge of the diaphragm and see how far this pulls. You know, when we engage it, is this just, you know, sucking the rubber down and like just barely pulling this enough to engage? Because man, I would like to think I could pull as hard as that diaphragm can, but I don't know. Something's definitely going on here, I believe. Let's get a measurement. Let's see how far this goes. I think this should suck all the way in and pull that cable a fair amount. But let's get a reading as far as how much this thing's actually moving. So I think the easiest way to measure is probably from the front of this bracket to the end of the diaphragm. Let's see, so the edge there, I got 2 3/16, you know, from right there to right here. I want to fire it up and engage it and see how much this actually moves. And it was at this point the camera fell over and, well, I lost some footage here. Anyhow, I did do the running test. The actuator pulled in 1/8 of an inch. And just barely 1/8 of an inch. Basically, it was just sucking the diaphragm around the hard metal flange there and was barely moving, but I did get 1/8 inch of measurable movement from it. So we're back underneath. It's our actuator. There's something of an anomaly there. We're in 2-wheel drive. We left it in 2-wheel drive. Our front axle is still engaged. There's got to be something going on with this thing. So I say we cut our zip tie. We're going to have a little bit of a closer look as to what is happening here. I'm take and buzz this back off. Something going on that I obviously overlooked. There, now it's in 2-wheel drive again. Get the flashlight here. And it pulls it that far for crying out loud to get it in 4-wheel drive. And it releases. Something that's being overlooked. One thing we can do while we're right here is just get our proof of concept. So we're in a 2-wheel drive position right now. Our shaft is, oh, let's see where we at here. Almost 1 3/4. Yeah, I'd call it 1 3/4 in 2-wheel drive. Get it to engage here. Got to kind of get it to bind up. So that's 4-wheel drive. We're at 2 inches. So we move 1/4 of an inch. Up top, we're only moving in, you know, barely 1/8 of an inch. So I think that has to speak for something there. Check that. Yeah, it's 2. Ouch, it's hot. 2, maybe 2 1/16, and then 1 3/4. So like a solid 1/4 of an inch it pulls. It's got to be some reason. You know, obviously this moves easy. We should be able to pull that with the cable, no problem. So let's focus kind of back on our cable and see what in the thunder is happening here. So I say we try this. We know this portion works. You'd think this would be really simple. It's kind of dragging out in a little bit of a process here. I got my theory is what's going on. I'm going to clip a small pair of vice grips here on the end of this cable. I'm going to go up and move the actuator. Or we should see the vice grips, you know, obviously, you know, move in and out, and you know, make sure this isn't binding. I'll even stick a bolt back in this here to kind of hold this up where we can see it. Like I say, we should see those vice grips kind of moving in and out on us. Well, we can see that obviously works. One thing I'm wondering is if when the actuator, you know, when it pulls the cable, when it pulls the clutch fork out, there's the ball bearing in there for the switch. I just wonder if it can't pull past this switch. That's what the switch looks like. The switch isn't seized, but we can take that out of the equation. It sits down, like I say, this is kind of a step down housing, but I believe this portion of the clutch fork is already into the step down portion. But I don't know, with this thing being, you know, all the rust that got under it, the way that it tweaked it, because it did deform it, you know, quite significantly, and I don't know if it's causing this to bind or not. But we'll see if we can't put it on there minus the switch. Oops, get it to engage here. Okay, it's all engaged. I'll tighten it back down and we'll see if we got any different results. It is pretty tweaked, to be honest with you. You can see it's all bulged out on the corners, you know, like I say, from all that rust. I don't know, maybe that's maybe it's binding us up on that shaft in there. Of course, it's hard to see, but being everything moves, it's kind of looking like it's coming down to that housing. I'm gonna climb up the ladder and move this wheel and see if I can pull it. All right, so I can pull it now. That's released. That's pulled. That's four-wheel drive. Okay. I do see it seem to have the ability to move it now. All right, so we're back under here, or back up on top here. Our actuator, we know that we can move it by hand now. We can hear it engage. So that's more than we could do before, and that's all because of that switch, which I think is all ultimately because the rust has tweaked that plastic housing. But let's redo our measurements here. Let's make sure we're fully relaxed. It's in two-wheel drive. So we're at 2 and oh yeah, 2 inches right on the money actually to the edge of this bracket. And we're looking to gain at least a 1/4 inch movement. Last time I don't think we even had 1/8 of an inch up here. So let me fire it up, see what we have. Oh, okay, so visibly, I can't see this because I'm inside the truck, but it looks like the diaphragm pulled in visibly farther. We need at least a 1/4 inch to match what we had down there. And we are at 2 3/8, so we're actually more, we're about a 1/16 more than what I expected. Before we were moving, I think, like 2 to 2 1/8. Now we're past, yeah, we're at 2 3/8 right on the nose. So technically, I think if we take this for a shimmy out in the parking lot, that should prove everything. So if we're following along okay, I think you kind of see where we're at. what I think happens, I don't think ultimately, let me find our little switch here. What we did with it. I don't think it's the fault of the switch itself. The switch moves, you know, very easily. But what I think is happening is that our plastic, you know, housing down there that the cable goes into has gotten so much rust behind it. I don't think it's sitting parallel on the axle anymore, because the metal clutch fork has to come into that straight, and you know, if that's kind of coming up, you know, bound towards the top of the housing, and you know, what it does essentially is it drives past this switch, you know, it drives past it, and as it comes past it, it's supposed to push it down, you know, as it comes in this direction here, which is pretty difficult to simulate. But I think you get the concept when that clutch actuator comes out, you know, pushes in, it hits this, you know, ball bearing, you know, depresses the switch and sends a signal to the transfer case module saying the front axle is engaged. So what I want to do is we took this out. If this works, you know, we'll go out in the parking lot, we'll shimmy around with it and make sure it doesn't make any noise. Now it should crow hop like crazy, you know, it should bind up and, you know, the front tires, but we shouldn't hear that loud snapping and popping that we did prior with the, what I suspect is the front axle disengaging, because I don't think it was engaging all the way because of this. Well, because of the plastic housing, and if that's the case, if it's fixed, what I'm going to do is get a new, I don't know if we got to get a plastic housing and cable or what the story is, but obviously we got to get some new parts at that point. People must think I'm a lunatic. I'm always out driving around my parking lot, hood open and doing weird things, but we gotta leave the hood open because I got a jumper pack on it. We ain't going far. This thing doesn't really want to idle. Okay, wait for cars to clear. Alright, so I'm gonna put it in 4-wheel drive because I did it backing up before. It didn't really matter. We just turned the wheel. Nope, that was not the fix. Well, that seemed like a waste of time, huh? Maybe a problem, but not the problem. Or maybe it stripped out that front axle coupler because it's been doing this for too long. Who knows? So that last little bit of video I just gave you, zooming in on that actuator, I left the camera under the hood kind of for my own sake, so I could see if when this was making noise. So I first got in the vehicle, I put it in 2-wheel and then 4-wheel drive, and you can kind of see the diaphragm kind of puff there a little bit. The other thing you see is, you know, it engages, you'll watch it drop right in. But then when it starts making noise, it stays fully engaged. You know, it's not like the clutch fork's pulling it back out there in the front axle. I think we found a problem, but obviously not the problem. You know, it's obvious to me, you know, obviously from our first test we did, that actuator wasn't even hardly pulling, you know, 1/8 of an inch. You know, now we've got it pulling, you know, fully engaging the front axle, but I think it would be best at this point to identify that noise. Is it 100% the front axle, or is it you know, something coming from the transfer case? You know, there's nothing to say that we didn't have, you know, two different problems here. Wouldn't be the first time. So I'm going to grab the engine ear. We're going to take in, or the chassis ear. It's kind of a, you know, a remote device that we can listen to different components. But boy, I tell you, with that you know, drive shaft in the mix, that's really going to resonate noise, I think, you know, training, you know, from the transfer case front axle. But we'll see if we can't hear one that's perhaps louder than the next. I've got everything here. It's always a little tricky. So I'm using our chassis ear, which I probably should have done first, but I could have swore the noise was in the front end, which, you know, we very well may be dealing with two problems here, but that's neither here nor there. So this is a chassis ear. It's just an electronic stethoscope, which allows me to run like 6 channels. So I've got the white channel here is channel 1, channel 2, and so channel 1 is our front axle. I've got the actuator, or the little clamp hooked right to the actuator, and I'll turn this on and I'll see if we hear any noise up there. Then I'll switch to channel 2, which I've got clipped right to the transfer case, and see if we hear noise there. And if we do, we're gonna have to, I don't know, do something. We'll back this out. We're in 2-wheel drive. Gonna listen to the front axle first. We're in 4-wheel drive. Where I don't run into anything. If I switch back and forth between the transfer case and front axle, it's pretty hard to tell. You just put it in low range. You want to see something that's in low range. Pretty hard to tell. Well, you guys can't see me, but it's hard to tell. It's loud in both, but like I say, it's going to resonate up through that drive shaft. Well, let me think what I want to do next. Here, you guys can have a listen. So this first one is going to be the front axle. That's 2-wheel drive. That's 4-wheel drive. So that's what the front axle sounds like. Let me show you the transfer case. This is going to be the transfer case. I'll switch it in and out so you can hear the actuator. So that's 4-wheel drive right there. Well, it's turned out to a much lengthier diagnosis than what I thought it would be. Typically when these things are broke, they're broke, but really didn't know what we were getting into when I first started. I don't know how it come across, you know, stuffing the earmuffs over the camera, but at any rate, to my ear, you know, initially I swear it was in the front axle, or sounded in the front axle, but listening to the chassis ear, that transfer case sounds pretty loud. Now, both of the, you kind of have to train your ear to listen to stethoscopes. You know, the front axle, yeah, it was making noise, but, you know, the drive shaft is hooked to it too, but the noise was duller. It wasn't as sharp and as pronounced as, let's say, the transfer case. That was real tinny, you know, wank, 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 every time this thing was making noise. I guess what I would do next, it's kind of bizarre because, you know, we got more than double the engagement of the front axle, you know, but like I say, I think we might have been barking up the wrong tree. Definitely is a problem, or would be a problem in the future if, you know, if it already hasn't started to bevel that clutch gear. At any rate, that's a problem. So what I want to do is see, put the truck up on a lift and see if we can duplicate it on the lift, because it's getting a little bit harder to diagnose, number one, by myself, without having somebody there where I can actually see. And number two, we have to do it in the parking lot, which is even harder. So I say we just take a minute now and see if we can duplicate on a lift, maybe power brake it a little, see if we can gather some clues from there. And because there's really not much we can look at in the transfer case short of pulling it out and taking it apart. And I would like to be 100%, just like with our electrical diagnosis, we want to be 100% before we tell the customer it needs, X. We know it needs that front axle actuator. We know that, but we also know that's not going to 100% fix this problem. So let's keep moving on here. So being that I'm working by myself, I'm going to try to use the camera as a diagnostic tool. In this shot, we can see the front drive shaft, rear drive shaft, and both front wheels. And I'm going to try to duplicate the problem on the lift. And we'll see, do the front wheels quit moving and all the noise keeps continuing? Does the front drive shaft quit spinning? What's the story? So hopefully this helps. Well, we've learned two things. First of all, a camera is a wonderful diagnostic tool in the shop. And second thing is the front axle is engaged fully. So in that previous clip there, we were in four-wheel drive. I was holding my foot on the brake and you could see the sticker on the drive shaft, was rotating when I was letting it rotate. But then when I did a little power brake, front drive shaft quit turning and the front wheels quit turning and it was making all that snapping. So that's 100% confirmed. Problems in the transfer case. It sounds, like the chain slipping. So I'm only human. But like I say, I'm going to see what this customer wants to do, whether he wants me to, tear apart this transfer case and repair it, or if he wants to get a used one, in which case, we'll record it, we'll tear it apart and, see what happened anyways. We could probably take a quick look, see what we can see through the drain plug, which usually isn't much, or through the fill plug rather. But yeah, and I'm also going to suggest that he gets a new front axle actuator so that, fully engages the front axle and, doesn't cause any problems in the future in the event he decides to fix us. I don't know if he's going to or not. The truck's got a terrible gas leak. I can smell it. It stinks. It must be leaking out of one of the, the return line or something, because it seems to start and run okay. Bummer. But at any rate, at least we didn't go just guessing and throwing some parts at it. We know what's going on now, and let's see if we can have a look and figure it out a little bit further without taking anything apart, and then we'll make the phone call. That's full of fluid anyways, that's always a plus. The fluid looks wicked nasty. And it's pretty sparkly. An odd color. I don't know if you can see anything. Now you can see the bottom half of the chain, but that's about it. I don't got anything to poke in here. I can't reach it with that. I have to get something different. Try to give it the best look I can in the transfer case hole. Problem's pretty obvious now. So that piece flopping up and down there, that's the bottom half of our chain for our front axle, or for our front drive shaft. Obviously has a tremendous amount of slop in it from whatever the case may be. But before we go any further, we're gonna have to make a phone call now. I don't know if you guys can see the glitter there in the fluid. Let me try to focus this on there for you. Get the light shimmering through it, get some more fluid slopping out of there. Those things that probably look like little white dots are on your computer screen. That's glitter. It's not the good kind of glitter either. Yeah, bummer. Now we'll put our switch back in there. Everything kind of buttoned back up. Now we know what's going on. Let's see what they want to do. I think we'll just throw this all back on. Like I said, I'm not 100% sure the guy's going to fix this truck. It does have a pretty bad gas leak too. So just in case he says no or whatever the case may be, we just want to have it back together and ready to go. I definitely am thankful that we took it to the next step and actually did a full verification. I'm sure it would have been pretty easy to quit on that front axle, you know, especially once we found it wasn't pulling all the way. There you have it, viewers. We got this one all wrapped up, and I made the phone call. It was all over but the crying, and we got through that part okay. It does sound like we're going to have a part two. Sounds like he wants to you know, put a used transfer case in this thing, you know, which is fine by me. You get these used transfer cases for these S10s super cheap. These S10s are very plentiful in our area, especially these little four-wheel drives. These and Blazers and stuff, and I think that new process transfer case is pretty universal across the board, and like I say, quite plentiful, and get a good use low mileage one. So if that's the case when we get the job, which I assume we will, when we tear it apart, even though we're not rebuilding the old one, we'll take and just pop that back cover off and have a look and see what failed, and you know, just kind of get a look at the inner workings of a transfer case. If you guys never seen them, there's really not much in there. You know, I got a planetary gear set and shift fork. You know, not a whole lot anyways, and a chain, a little oil pump, and that's about it. You know, what caused it to fail, I don't know, and you know, neither does he, but we know it's broke now because we got some definitive proof. But it's a good thing we went a little bit further and actually kind of started with the front end, because you know, we're going to fix that axle actuator too, and you know, that will save him some problems in the future from chewing that clutch gear up there. So it's kind of a good thing, and it's always a good thing not to jump the gun with diagnosis, and you know, good thing we didn't just slam an actuator on it when we seen it wasn't gauging all the way, because we could have got stung, and that would stick with you. So always try to diagnose 100%, you know, get 100% confirmation if you can, particularly if you can do it without, you know, any parts costs, or you know, really tearing into things too heavily, in which case we did. You know, we're able to do it without really, you know, without buying anything other than time. And you know, time is valuable, but you know, the customers, you know, it's what they're paying you to do, is to figure out what the problem is and what it's going to cost to fix it. He gave me a whole another list that he wants done with it too at the same time. So sounds like this thing's going to be coming back for a bunch of fixes he wants done. And but like I say, if and when it does, I will be recording the transfer case. So stick around and look for part two. Subscribe to our channel if you haven't, if you want to make sure you get the notification as to when that'll become available, and you can check that out. You can find us on Facebook. You can like us there. You can connect with us socially on Google Plus too. And just remember, viewers, if I can do it, you can do it. Thanks for watching.